Now that we got the big chunk of the missing puzzle handed to us, we the people can go right ahead and participate in a much needed change. This petition is intended to cause that change by having many people from different countries vote for it to reach the level of referendum, which then would imply an update of human rights, and lastly to have it be a part of the constitution of each country involved in this update process. It is absolutely obvious that the system in its entirety has morphed over time to the corrupt way it is now. Not by evolving naturally, but by design. It is no coincidence that former USSR countries had the same issues with extremely expensive utility bills, rapid rising inflation, and so on. It is no coincidence that in many countries all over the world the same patterns appear when it comes to utility bills, rent prices, food prices, and so on. By controlling these aspects, people sometimes tend to end up living in a continuous downward spiral survival mode, and oftentimes end up committing crimes in order to be able to get resources to survive. This isn't a coincidence either. Throughout history, food deprivation has been one of the most used tactics in long-term warfare or oppression. Spectacular progressions over the years of the telephone, television set, transportation, the internet. Now, let's look at the so-called democratic system as a whole. Almost zero accountability for government officials, politicians, police forces and secret services abuses. Politicians getting more and more versed at dodging questions and keeping the status quo at the same time. Playing loose and fast with important issues. Lack of transparency when it comes to all contracts between the state or government, and the same forever beneficiaries. Police officers become tyrants right under our eyes and phones. Feel free to add the ones I missed. I'm sure there's a lot to add. Over the years in the US Constitution, the Second Amendment has lost its original meaning. The right to bear arms was in place to prevent the government from acting like a tyrant by empowering the citizens to stand for their rights to the extent of actually using live ammo. Should it come down to this? By this analogy, I would find it fair for the citizens to defend themselves every time there's a cop pulling their gun on any citizen, especially when it is not justified. Therefore, breaking the spirit of the Second Amendment at their discretion, oftentimes abusing their authority. This amendment has morphed into a law that's there to justify everyone having guns, and that's pretty much it. I'm sure there are many countries having similar cases which need an oversight and an implicit change. I was using this law as an example to make the point of updating legislation in general, especially the Human Rights Act. We need these updates, because they are well overdue, and since we know the government is just a larger scale management structure operating on the people's resources, we, the people, demand the government to facilitate for us with free and clean running water. Many issues all around the planet can be fixed just by this one simple act. Real-life free speech, including insults, on any and all platforms or mediums. It is self-evident that in a sane and mature society there may be inconvenient speech for some of us, but that should not be an excuse to moderate or infringe speech. Arresting people for internet posts that caused distress and other feelings belong only in an Orwellian society. This is just a guideline for this particular issue, and it should be down to the local government to decide the specifics. A real checks and balances process within a country is very much needed. Also, wherever an official is sworn in or is about to fill in a mandate granted by the people, they have to sign the Responsibility Act, making them accountable for any and all future decisions which may end up being against the interest of the people, thus keeping them in check at all times. Refusing to act accordingly on some issues or dodging questions are some examples of reasons one might get suspended. Matters not acted on for 6 months is also an example for suspension, including the clerks involved in that particular ministry or police department and so on. The 1 to 1,000 to 1 million law. One person or entity within the ruling structures of a country should not have the authority to decide for other people. To sacrifice their life to go into battle or war, especially if they are very old and could not be around for another 15 to 20 years to be liable for any and all critical decisions made. There should be an elite group forward/squad formed by international peace negotiators from the G20+ and an army capable to immediately intervene or to step in when an international conflict is being raised by whoever wants to invade or attack another sovereign country and get down to the root problem preventing any warfare. While all of this is in process, there should be an international law preventing any state officials from initiating warfare, especially if that country has a nuclear arsenal. After these new developments, it is clear that it is not a balanced judiciary act to get arrested for jaywalking and have a long list of rapists and cannibals within our society at the same time. Especially when there are no arrests being made regarding these horrific crimes. Given this fact, there should be reclassification of the worst crimes. Violent murder acts, cannibalism, sexual child harm, rape, violent robberies, other crimes. I might be wrong and I hope I am, but I don't think there's a way to rehabilitate criminals guilty of the first 4 examples of horrible crimes and they should be sentenced to life in prison. We should live in a system that is visibly trying to rehabilitate inmates who committed other crimes by having them work in the agriculture domain, especially in cutting down the weeds in the crops, which is needed twice per culture, and have their sentence reduced this way. By doing so to the grains and vegetables or any crops really, all of the pesticides would be no longer needed. It is a bit more labor intensive, but hopefully in time we'll be able to find better alternatives. For now, it is a start. All wars are being fought over resources. The Venezuela operation and Iran war are some of the latest examples in that way, and the monopoly of these resources. But what if we find other methods to get energy rather than to bully our way into wars? It is known that drilling deep enough into the Earth's crust, we'll find that it is quite hot. And at around 2 kilometers deep, we can organize a steam engine and use it to get electricity. This is also known as geothermal energy, which in a sense, would be free for all. And this way, we could stop using nuclear power plants, which are more expensive to run and do essentially the same job. At the end of the day, we are all humans and have the same needs, meaning we are more alike than different. Just because not all of us get the chance to be into the key decision-making roles, that doesn't mean there are people lesser than others. All of the person's digital footprint is to be reflected back to the citizen, whatever country they are from, and it should be their decision as to using it in any way they see fit. A game of labels. Divide and conquer. They pretty much divided everything there was, and because it is a dynamic thing, new tactics are put in place to counterbalance every move. After we have established we don't need any more wars, so no tax money would go into making weapons. Any taxpayer should have options to direct their tax money towards whatever they choose, except secret services and wars. Any citizen in any country adopting this petition/referendum into their constitution should not have to put up with any lawmakers that have a new idea to infringe their liberties, forbid this or that with a new law. That should not be possible. And all parliament or government members that show no progress within 6 months of being in a public office, that member is to be suspended along with all the bureaucracy staff, and that position should be called obsolete and voided. Good ideas for citizens should be promoted and not infringed only because they have the power to do so. Any citizen who has any particular piece of land should have the right to plant anything on it and have a greenhouse. Should they choose one for personal consumption and or exchange goods with other citizens, as long as any parties involved consider a particular trade to be fair. Lower than 10% tax for any and all agricultural working citizens. Countries without a constitution should have a referendum to get the opportunity of voting for implementation of a constitution based on the human rights revised. By voting for this change, we'll be able to grow and mature into a peaceful global civilization and be closer to what some people say other cultures were like in our past, or what other people say about remembering other incarnations on other planets and their civilization. The main point they make is that there's no need for wars and that we all can fit in this world perfectly fine, and that the name of the game is peace and harmony through compassion, wisdom, integrity, and dignity. Once we have that in place, other heavenly doors open for us. Now, I can only hope Yuri Bisminov would be wrong, and people getting to find this piece of information will not immediately ignore it or have a repelling instinct to it. Better yet, do your own research and prove me wrong by doing so, please.